Imagine trying to build a country from scratch. Not over hundreds of years, but in just a few really intense decades. Well, that's pretty much the story of modern Israel, and it was written by a series of immigration waves called Aliyot. Today, we're going to break down how each wave brought not just people, but brand new ideas, skills, and challenges that literally forged a nation.
Okay, so to get this whole story, you have to understand one really powerful word, aliyah. In Hebrew, it literally means to ascend or to go up. So this isn't just about packing your bags and moving. The word itself is loaded with meaning. It frames immigration as this spiritual national climb towards a historic homeland.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the very first pioneers, then move to the ones who built the nation's infrastructure. After that, we'll look at a desperate wave of people who were literally fleeing for their lives, and finally, we'll see what happened when the floodgates flew open after 1948. Every single one is a unique chapter.
This timeline really gives you the bird's eye view, and you can see right away how concentrated these waves are, starting in 1882 and just building and building in intensity right up to the founding of the state in 48. I mean, this was a period of incredibly rapid, transformative change.
All right, let's dive in with those first pioneers. Long before there were cities or even a state, there was just the land. And these first immigrants, they were driven by an idea that to build a nation, you had to start by connecting with the soil.
So the first big organized wave kicks off in 1882. We're not talking huge numbers of people just yet, but what's driving them is a huge deal. Over in Eastern Europe, these violent anti-Jewish riots, pogroms, are erupting, and at the exact same time, a new idea called political Zionism is starting to catch on, arguing that the Jewish people needed a national home.
So you've got these two incredibly powerful forces at play. On one side, you have the absolute terror of the pogroms pushing them out of Russia, and on the other, you have the pull of this new dream, pushed by groups calling themselves the Lovers of Zion. Their legacy wasn't really in politics, it was on the land itself. They're the ones who founded some of the very first modern Jewish farming settlements.
Now, just after the turn of the century, a totally new kind of pioneer arrives, and they bring with them a powerful and very different ideology, socialism. This wave wasn't just about escaping danger, it was about actively trying to build a brand new workers' utopia.
So what made this group so different? Well, their motivation. A lot of them were young, idealistic socialists, many coming right from failed revolutions in Russia. They didn't just want to farm the land, they wanted to build an entirely new society from the ground up, based on collective ideals. And this vision gave birth to two iconic institutions, the communal farm, you know it as the kibbutz, and the very first self-defense group, Hashomer.
Okay, now we shift gears. After World War I, the focus starts to move away from just laying the foundation out in the fields to building a much more complex society. And that means new motivations are driving people to new places, specifically the growing cities.
The third Aliyah kicks off right after World War I, and the world looks completely different. The biggest thing is that in 1917, Great Britain issued what's known as the Balfour Declaration, a public statement supporting a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was a political game changer. It fueled a whole new wave of optimism and a sense of purpose.
So these immigrants, they were pioneers of a totally different kind. The British were now governing the territory, and their focus turned to pure nation building. Their biggest contribution was the hard, back-breaking labor of creating a national infrastructure. You know, the roads, the ports, all the systems you need to support a growing population and eventually a state.
The next wave, though, was driven by something else entirely. It wasn't about big ideas or ideologies. It was about something much more practical, closing doors. Other countries, especially the United States, were shutting down immigration, and people had to find somewhere else to go.
And this was a huge shift. In 1924, the United States passed these really strict immigration quotas. So all of a sudden, thousands of middle-class Polish Jews who probably would have gone to America couldn't. They weren't socialist farmers, they were shopkeepers, craftsmen, small business owners. And they poured into the little city of Tel Aviv, turning it into a bustling urban center.
This slide really shows a crucial turning point. You have the second Aliyah, right, driven by these socialist ideals, creating collective farms. And then, barely a decade later, the fourth Aliyah shows up, a middle-class capitalist wave focused on private business in the city. This created this fundamental tension, this incredible diversity in the society before there was even a state. You had a place being built on both socialist and capitalist foundations at the same time, a dynamic that would shape politics there for generations.
And now, we enter a much, much darker period. From this point on, the reason people are immigrating takes a sharp and really urgent turn. The political situation in Europe is getting worse with terrifying speed. This is no longer about building a dream. For many, it's about escaping a nightmare.
The fifth Aliyah starts in 1929, and it really ramps up after 1933. This wave brought an unprecedented influx of professionals, academics, and intellectuals, mostly from Central Europe.
The driver here was singular, and it was stark: Hitler's rise to power in Germany. This wave wasn't about laying roads, it was about laying the foundations of a modern, sophisticated society. It brought this incredible concentration of doctors, lawyers, architects, and artists, who went on to establish many of the cultural and professional institutions that still define Israel today.
But just as the crisis in Europe was reaching a boiling point, the doors to legal immigration started to slam shut. And this led to a new, desperate chapter: a clandestine, underground movement to smuggle Jews into Palestine. This was known as Aliyot.
And this just begs the question, right? You have to remember, the British were strictly limiting who could come in. The journeys on these overcrowded, often barely seaworthy ships were incredibly dangerous. So why? Why would thousands of people risk absolutely everything to do it?
Well, the answer is that they were caught in this absolutely brutal trap. The push factor was the Holocaust, an unimaginable terror unfolding in Europe. And at the exact same time, the British issued the White Paper of 1939, creating a blockade that severely restricted any legal way in. So caught between annihilation and a locked door, this clandestine emigration became the only option left for so many.
This desperate struggle leads us directly into our final chapter. In 1948, the State of Israel is founded, and everything changes. The British are gone, and suddenly what was once a restricted trickle just becomes a flood.
The scale of what happened next is just staggering. As you can see here, in just 3 years, the country's Jewish population doubled. This massive influx came from two main places: hundreds of thousands of Holocaust survivors coming out of the camps in Europe, and, at the very same time, entire Jewish communities fleeing persecution from Arab countries like Iraq, Yemen, and Morocco. And the story of Aliyah didn't just stop in 1951. No, the waves kept coming, reshaping the country for decades. Throughout the 50s and 60s, more people came from North Africa. Then, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, over 1 million Russian-speaking Jews arrived, which was a fundamental culture shift. And in the 80s and 90s, you had these historic airlifts that brought the ancient Jewish community of Ethiopia to Israel in these really dramatic operations. Each wave just added another unique layer. So, all of this leaves us with one final crucial thought. We've just walked through a century of immigration. Socialist farmers, middle-class shopkeepers, German intellectuals, Holocaust survivors, Moroccan Jews, Soviet engineers, Ethiopian villagers, all in one tiny place. The story of Aliyah is really the story of a nation that's in a constant state of reinvention. And it leaves us with the central question Israel is still grappling with today. How do you take all of these incredibly different worlds and forge them into one single cohesive identity?